That brings us to the main event, folks. You made it here. We got there. All the way to the end of the show. We've got 282 live viewers. Thank you all so much for spending your Monday evenings with us. We appreciate you hanging out with us. We've got Anthony Smith taking on Alexander Rakic, and I will let my esteemed guest go ahead and kick us off to break down this final night. James, tell me about it.
Well, let me just tell you, I'm thinking what everyone else is thinking, okay? Because I know someone's going to say it. I'll just say it now. Yes, Anthony Smith is coming back too soon.
You can hear the fingers typing, right?
I can hear people saying, like, why is he coming back? And here's the crazy thing, Clint. He wanted to come back even sooner. Watch my interview with him on Line Movement. He talks all about it. Luckily, I got a chance to speak with Anthony before ESPN and everyone else, so I got a really good insight into his camp and everything. But he wanted to get in there right away and get another fight, which, all the power to him, but I think it's a little too soon. He took a lot of damage against Glover Teixeira, got his teeth knocked out. I know they're veneers anyways, but still, it wasn't a good outcome for him there. So this is such an interesting fight to me. I think, is Rakic the real deal? There's certainly evidence to show that. Knocking out Jimmy Manuwa, finishing Devin Clark. I thought he won his last fight against Volkan Ozdemir, right? So realistically, this is a guy who could be on quite the winning streak. He could be undefeated in the UFC outside of his last fight. But it's tough to say if that's the case, because I think this is a question we're going to get answered on Saturday for both guys, right? Because with Anthony Smith, too, it's a bit of a weird career as well, right? Moves up to light heavyweight. Finishes Shogun, finishes Rashad Evans, gets that title shot against John Jones. Went the distance with John. I don't think John clearly won, but it wasn't like a total, like a fight where, Smith took a beating like he did against Glover, right? And even in that Glover fight, he was winning the first round. I thought it just sort of faded. I think what Anthony thought was that he was going to finish Glover. That didn't happen. And it was just a case of just exhaustion where you could see the hands going down a little bit lower. He was taking shots and Glover just sort of took over. A veteran that he is, he was able to sort of, take the punishment and fight back and get a big win there. So this is such an experience-wise. I mean, Rakic has got 14 fights. Smith has got close to 40 fights. Fought at welter, fought at middleweight, fought a little bit at catchweights. I mean, he's been everywhere as far as the who's who and promotions. I mean, I'm looking at Tapology right now as pictures of him in Strikeforce, which is crazy to think. This is how long of a career this guy's had. So it's very interesting. The other thing is, like we mentioned with Zach Cummins earlier, if Cummins loses that fight, is that going to hurt Smith in this card? We don't know. That's another thing to sort of keep an eye on if that affects his momentum or not. But I got to be honest, I'm having a tough time with this one. So there's people who believe that Rakic is the next big thing, but I kind of get some Johnny Walker vibes from that because you got to look at who he's fighting. He's fought Justin Ledet, went the distance with him. That Devin Clark fight, I was at that fight. That was in Toronto. I remember Devin Clark actually hitting Rakic pretty good in that first round, and you kind of went like, whoa, what's going on here? Luckily, Rakic was able to turn it around and get the finish later on in the round. But if you remember early on, Clark had got some good shots on that. Now, that is a good win because Clark coming off the win over Menefield in his last fight, that was pretty good. Jimmy Manuwa, that's an iffy one because Manuwa's, I think he was on his way to retirement at that point, or at least close to it. I know he was ranked and all that. But again, that's another weird win there. And the fact that he went to a split against Volkan in a fight that he lost, I thought he won. But the fact it was still a close fight against Volkan is also interesting because Smith finished Volkan. The thing with Smith as well is that, here's a guy that was losing most of his fights, like the Gustafsson fight. He was losing that fight, ended up coming back and finishing him. Was losing against Volkan Ozdemir, came back and finished him, right? So
that's every fight, man.
That's all of his fights, and this is only 3 rounds. So I don't know who that really favors. By the way, I see people in the chat saying that Smith wanted 3 rounds or whatever. No. This was supposed to be Zabit and Yair Rodriguez. That's why this is 3 rounds. With the fact that they were knocked out of this fight, because that was going to be the main event, this was always going to be 3 rounds. So it wasn't a case of Smith saying, I want less rounds or whatever. I think more rounds would benefit Smith because usually you can turn it around here. So, height and reach and all that, Rakic, 6'4" with a 78-inch reach. Anthony Smith is 6'4" with a 76-inch reach. So physically, not much different. Age-wise, Smith's 4 years older. Not a huge difference there. Just way more experience. So what I'm going to say is this. I think Alexander Rakic might end up pulling this off. I think, the fact that he hasn't endured as much damage as Anthony Smith, the fact that he's sour after losing that last fight against Volkan Ozdemir, a fight that I thought he won, and go to MMADecisions.com, most of the media members. In fact, I think all the media members except for one scored that fight for Alexander Rakic. So I think Rakic is good. I think, is he going to go out there and finish Anthony Smith in the first round? No, I don't think that's going to happen. I think you got to give Smith more credit than that just because of one loss here. But I got to take a guy who's, fresher, less damage, and just, in some ways has less to lose here. If he loses this fight, big deal. He's going to live to see another day. If Anthony Smith loses this fight, where does he go from here, right? Because he's losing to an up-and-comer. So I'm going to pick Rakic for the pick. But if this line gets a little bit out of control, and I have a feeling it could, because right now I can tell you just on my YouTube channel from doing that Pros Picks video where half the fighters picked Smith, there's some angry Serbian fans out there who think that Rakic is God and that this is the guy to beat John Jones and everything else. So I could see this line getting up even higher. And if this gets to plus 300, I am going to throw a little bit on Anthony Smith because I do see value on there with him being the more experienced guy. But with the damage he's taken, with the fact I think he needs more time off, I got to go Rakic here. So Rakic by decision is my pick. I don't think he'll finish Anthony Smith in 3 rounds.
Okay. I like it. I like it a lot, man. So you hit a lot of points. You hit a lot of the things that we really needed to talk about. And the main one for me is Anthony Smith is always losing until the point that he flips the fight on its head and comes back for the win. And that is so hard for me, especially as a sports bettor. His last fight against Glover Teixeira, Glover's one of my favorite underdogs of all time, and I called it to a T. I told everyone that Glover was going to win that fight. And we bet the over, just hinging on the durability issue to kind of keep that in our back pocket, that maybe this is the one where Glover's old and drops off a cliff. But it turns out he was the one doing the mauling. And it was uncomfortable because he almost got him out of there in the third. But Anthony Smith is just so tough, man. He's one of these guys that is too tough for his own good almost, kind of like you talked about. And I don't know. He took a whole lot of damage from Glover in that last fight. Normally speaking, I'm with you. I like when guys take about 6 to 9 months off after a fight like that. He took a beating. But Glover made it pretty clear he didn't want to hurt him in that fight. I mean, he literally apologized to the guy when he had him trapped. That was one of maybe some really awful refereeing. You know what I mean? It became apparent in round 4 that Smith couldn't do anything, and Glover was just pounding on him, and the referee let him do it for a full 5 minutes. And then finally had a mercy killing in round 5 when he stopped it. Like, they should have stopped that fight in round 4. Just get the guy out of there. Especially when he started handing him his teeth. Like you said, I know they're veneers, but when you start handing the referee your teeth, like, come on, man. That's the time to call it. Save the kid a couple of years off of his life. But what I saw from Anthony Smith in that fight was something I've never seen before. He won the first round. He completely reinvented his game. He came out against Glover with the intention of stamping himself as a contender. And instead of losing the fight until he won it, he was winning the fight until he lost it.
Yep.
And arguably, it was the veteran savvy of Glover Teixeira. I don't know if you caught this, James. He punched Anthony Smith right in the dick. And
I didn't see that, no.
It was a low blow that was an accidental shot, and you can see Glover wind it up. He was getting mauled in the second round by Anthony Smith, and then he took that cup shot, gave himself the full 5 minutes to get his wind back, and that's when the tide turned of the fight. Just a sick veteran move by Glover Teixeira to get out of there in that kind of a circumstance. We talk about level of competition, we talk about experience, and that all falls into the category of Anthony Smith here. And the fact that he looked so dang good coming out the last fight in the early goings, I think he understands the adjustments he needs to make, and I saw most of those adjustments. He just had an opponent that was kind of an unbreakable wall that didn't drop in front of him, and he tired himself out trying to break Glover. If he continues coming out like that, I think this guy can make waves at 205. I've talked about how his record is a bit padded. He's beat, 185ers. He's beaten over-the-hill type of guys. He shouldn't have been in there with John Jones in the first place. But now that he's filled out at 205, he's really coming into his own. I think he could actually do something if he continues this upward trajectory. Rakic on the flip side of this thing, like you said, he's the second coming of Johnny Walker. This dude's got power for days. But does he? I mean, I know he's got power. Don't get me wrong. He knocked out a bunch of people on the regional scene, but he struggled, air quotes here, against Francisco Barbarossa and Justin Ledet. Ledet is on an 0-3 run in the UFC, probably cut from the organization unless they need a short fill-in during COVID. And then Barbarossa is out of the UFC. He's been completely cut from the organization. And he went to decision with those guys. Devin Clark is not a 205er. I know he's fighting at 205. The man's a 185er and just has too much leg mass to get himself down to 185, but he is undersized for this division. So you knock that dude out in the first round, and like you said, Devin Clark had his moments in that fight. I thought Devin Clark was actually going to knock Rakic out
me too.
in that first round. Then he gets Jimmy Manuwa. who is the chinniest fighter on the roster. He's retired now after that fight. And he hit him with, honestly, one of the best highlights you'll ever get. Leapt across half the octagon to hit him with a head kick. Put the dude's poor head in the 5th row. Somebody got a nice little souvenir that night. But those are super easy spots for a lot of these contenders to show up. You know, most people are going to be able to beat Devin Clark if they're within the top 10 in the 205-pound division. Anybody in the top 5 is deading Jimmy Manawa at this stage of his career. And then, like you said, he struggled with Volkan Oezdemir. Now, I like Volkan Oezdemir a lot, but we've also seen him get turned up a little bit these last couple of fights. He's not quite the guy we all thought that he really was. So it was a close fight. I bet Volkan that night, and I completely agree with you that Alexander Rakic won that fight. So we can poke some holes here in Alexander Rakic, and I feel like it's a lot of recency bias that Glover did what he did to Anthony Smith, that everyone is suddenly off the boat because they thought that he wanted to get that shot with John Jones. I know a lot of people were talking about getting the rematch of Smith and John Jones after he's had the time to recalibrate. He learned a lot from that 5-round beating that he took, and he's coming back a new man. All of a sudden, everyone's off the boat because he lost to Glover. Glover, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated fighters in the UFC. Even though he's older, he just never stops getting better. That veteran savvy that I talked about earlier, he's got it in spades. He will find ways to win. This is the spot that you bet Anthony Smith, folks. You do not lay chalk. You don't lay chalk with Anthony Smith. Like we talked about, he's the guy that's losing until he flips the tables and wins. But he's a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. People forget how scary good on the ground this guy is. Glover nullified that. Glover is a solid wrestler and a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt himself. And Alexander Rakic, he tries to take fights to the ground when he can't get his opponents out of there. He struggles when he doesn't get that first-round knockout. What's that Devin Clark fight look like if he doesn't get the knockout in round 1? Because when he was fighting against Justin Ledet and Francismar Barbaroso, when he didn't get them out of there early, he went to his grappling. He takes people down. He pins them up against the cage. If you do that to Anthony Smith, he will choke your ass out. And I honestly think that Smith is one of these guys with an iron jaw. I know he took all that damage from Glover Teixeira in that last fight, but he's just got to avoid 1 or 2 big bombs from Rakic and make this thing dirty. As soon as he does that, this is a 50-50 fight. I think there's tons of value on Anthony Smith here, and I was honestly hoping the line would get a little bit wider, but it looks like it got about as wide as it's going to, and there's been some buyback here on Anthony Smith. I am planning on putting a unit on Anthony Smith here in this fight, because like I said, this dude is, at this point, underrated. Last fight, he was incredibly overrated. They can't figure out what to do with him, but the line has swung too far the other direction, in my opinion. And I think I'm actually going to roll the dice on Smith here in the main event.
Good for you, man. I'd see it. I do see it. I think it's one of those things, like, how good is someone in a particular matchup? And like you said, like, maybe, like you said, Smith overrated heading into that fight. We sort of saw that after. It's like, okay, well, we finally found that wall, right? And now with Rakic, it's like, this is the test. You know, you had the Volkan fight, you didn't pass it. I mean, you know, even if you would have won, that wasn't a great performance in terms of, you know, going the distance with Volkan. We've seen him get finished now a couple times. But yeah, we're gonna get a lot of answers here. But good for you, man. I give you props, because I'm a big Anthony Smith fan. I am. I love interviewing him. He's a great guy. I think he gets a lot of unnecessary hate. He's a great analyst. But yeah, that's
another thing, man. He's so intelligent. And
yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but like that's something I look for as well when it comes to betting. And he is smart. The dude knows how to break down his fights. He's extremely intelligent, and that kind of IQ, that goes a long way in fights. So I'm sorry, go ahead, continue.
No, you were totally right. And the other thing I'll just mention that I didn't really mention as well is that, you know, like I said with Zach Cummins, like, just great guys to work with. Like this Cody Brundage kid, I've been talking, you know, with a lot of people about him. He was a double champ in Lights Out Championship on the regional scene. This kid moved from Michigan to go train with, you know, Factory X, because he's so impressed with that team. And so he's just gelled in perfectly. Of course, they lost Ian Heinisch. He's not at that gym anymore. So to have a guy like Cody Brundage, who's you know, hungry and up and coming, I think that's only going to help in Anthony Smith, because he's fighting a young and hungry guy in Alexander Rakic. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing heading into this fight as well.